some people are kind of wrestling with the information that they've been hearing their entire lives. A lot of the time, the first thing people say to me is like, okay, when do I have to cut things back? Or, you know, what do I do with my leaves? And sometimes they're often surprised to hear when I say, don't do anything, leave it alone. And they're like, what do you mean? So just cut like a little bit of it? And I'm like, no, cut none of it. Or just take, do I put the leaves like, you know, in a pile in the back? And it's, nope, just leave them right where they are.
Welcome to Little Green Shoots. Today we're talking about how to put your yard to bed for winter. I have here Peter Judge, our Director of Digital Content, Mark Murray of Spadefoot and the Long Island Conservancy. And Brittany was newly aboard with Spadefoot, and she's doing a real bang-up job planning our plantings and getting her fingernails dirty. She helped to build some of that meadow behind her there. So, you know, you guys are out in the field, and you're speaking with customers now this time of year. What's their major concern as they look towards winter?
Some people do have those aesthetic concerns, but then, you know, we often tell people, you know, if you want to leave like a clean look in a certain part of your yard, you can put the leaves into the bed, and you can still get the ecological benefits of leaving the leaves while maintaining a little bit of an aesthetic that people are used to. So sometimes it's a little bit of a, you have to ease people into the more natural look than they're used to. But, you know, people are more receptive once they start getting the information a little bit.
Once they get bitten by the bug, it's really, really hard for them to retreat. It seems to be, you know, they get deeper and deeper into it. And the other idea about the lawn, though, I know, you know, that becomes the big issue with the leaves. You can move them into the beds if you don't want to leave them, but you can also use a mulching mower blade that will chop up the leaves into fine pieces that will not allow will not create a situation where the grass will die, but it will degenerate and become a food for the grass going forward. That's another option. And we've actually had customers have us come, take the leaves, grind the leaves, and respread the leaves. So the only carbon footprint really is the traveling to and from, and we either use an electric or a gas-powered grinder, depending on how much we got to do.
I also often get a lot of people who are really excited about new ways to use the leaves, like as a resource. So some people are like, you know what, for the first time I'm going to start building a compost bin, and they build a compost in their yard, or they're, you know, going to start a new vegetable bed, and they kind of sheet mulch it and pile on the leaves. So people then start, like, once you kind of detach from the traditional messaging that we've all received since, you know, we're born, people start to get really excited, and they start to get creative and thinking of new ways to use the leaves. And so I think that's really fun. You know, it's true. Once people get bitten, it's hard for them to stop.
Like when I got my first house in the 90s, I had I hated lawn care, and I did it anyway because we just bought the house. I wasn't buying a landscaper. But I would spend the extra time to make my lawn get that crisscross look like Yankee Stadium, because I thought that was so cool, you know, because the grass was so glorious. And the grass is kind of a remnant of days when it's actually a sign of arrogance to show that I have so much land that I can use this land for non-productive use, and I have all this extra space. And that has been an indication of wealth and luxury, and that has stayed for generations. And now we're breaking that and trying to get back into nature. And once people, like you said, once people see it, they can't unsee it. And it's much healthier for the environment to have native plants that surround your house and provide support for all the critters. One other point about the leaves we were talking about earlier with Marshall is, in addition to the food source that they are for plants, they're structures for our neighbor critters to live in. Butterfly, chrysalis, and other monarchs and other butterflies, small critters like squirrels and field mice. They find those piles as a place to winter over. So even if you want to take them out, you know, take them out if you have to in the spring, but give it to them for the winter, so that we have so much trouble with our monarch butterflies already. It gives us an opportunity to give them a chance to make it. If you're mulching the chrysalis, it ain't going to make it to spring.
Marshall, what changes has your property gone through over the course of the last 3 years that Spadefoot has helped us manage here?
Well, the integrity of the original plant design has held up very well, I'm happy to say. And there hasn't really been a big need for Spadefoot to come in and do much else other than to bring more plants on occasion.
Yeah, Ed, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but what I hear is a cricket in the background. I don't know if the mics are picking it up. That's the difference. Okay, there is life in this yard that you don't see anywhere else. You won't hear a cricket on any other yard on this block, because this is supportive of a cricket and all the other animals that live right here. Birds, butterflies, all over the place. Bees in the summer.
I had a peregrine falcon sitting up here the other day.
Wow.
I didn't believe him. I didn't believe him. I was just like, Marshall, that's a huge pigeon. There's no way that's a falcon.
I believe it. There's
I was
a lot
wrong.
of life here.
I was wrong. I fully, I fully admit I was wrong.
Just a fat pigeon.
Yeah. Oh.
Probably because it ate a fat pigeon.
Yeah,
No,
probably.
but you get so used to not seeing higher order predators. You get used to seeing, stuff that's adapted to suburbia, not stuff that you'd expect to see in a national park.
Right.
I want my backyard to feel like a national park as much as possible. It'd be nice if that connected to other people's small slices of national park.
Well, now we're on to something. You're familiar with Douglas Talame and Nature's Best Hope, the website homegrownnationalpark.org. He's encouraging everyone to put some nature in their yard so that they can encounter it directly there. So your home your yard can be a park, which I kind of think this is where we are right now.
Yeah.
I think
This is
so.
a preserve now. This has become a preserve instead of a yard.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing you've seen in the yard thus far? Peregrine falcon can be the answer. It can be,
No. The garter snake I found in April in a pile of debris I left there. I hadn't seen a garter snake on this property ever. We moved here in 1965.
That's
Wow.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's a sign that it's regenerating. Once you see predators, it's working, because that means they have food.
Right.
And that's so exciting. That is so beautiful.
Every time I see a frog in our yard, I send Frank a picture of it, and I ask him to identify like what kind of frog or toad it is. But what he told me was that just having any amphibians or reptiles shows that you're not poisoning the ground,
Right.
which is good, because the gentleman who used to own my house owned a garden center, so I know that there was probably a lot of fertilizer and insecticide used on our property before we got there, and now it's a fun opportunity for me to sort of turn that property into something closer to what Marshall has going on here.
So have you found a spadefoot toad in your yard yet?
I don't think it's been a spadefoot toad. It was I'll have to get back to you, but it was like the most common brown frog that was about the size of $1 that you could find in the Northeast. When I Google searched, it was like, this species is ubiquitous. So I'm like, great. Like not a rare find.
Buffalo
But it's
Americana.
the first step.
Yeah.
Brittany spoke earlier about the degeneration of our ecocycles, and even I'm 61. I was born in 1962, and I grew up in the 60s and the 70s. A lot going on there, off topic, but what I want to refer to is I used to see frogs everywhere. You don't see them everywhere anymore. Lightning bugs in June were lit the sky. I think I saw 2 this year.
This year I didn't get very many either.
They're everywhere. Here.
Yeah, see, monarch butterflies.
Even when I was a kid.
I don't see any.
I had fewer monarchs this year as well.
So this is an indication. I mean, and I'm an idiot. I don't know anything about ecosystems, but I know that's the fact that they're not showing up, and they were a part of my childhood. Horseshoe crabs. The horseshoe crabs used to come up and mate up on the North Shore at my grandparents' house. They're gone. I haven't seen one in forever. It's amazing. Our ecosystems are falling apart, and I love Marshall's line. We're doing it in ignorance, but once you're aware of the war that we're waging and losing, you can't unsee it anymore.
All right, so can I ask you guys a question? To what extent has big lawn kind of scammed us? Like how much are we as a country wasting on lawn care every year?
Well, I was paying $25, $50 a week, and the lawn, big lawn, if you want to call it, the chemicals of I don't want to use names, but there are a lot of companies that come and just put liquid fertilizer into your lawn. That's a couple $100. The leaf cleanup in the spring and in the fall, which isn't necessary. We're just talking about that. That costs another couple $100. It costs homeowners thousands of dollars a year, okay, to keep the lawn, okay, and it's not. And we're talking about how unnecessary it is. But we also have to recognize that because it's generations long, there are vested interests in industries that have been created to support that, and the lawn care has become so price oriented. This mow and blow, it's about getting enough money, which they have to compete with a lot of other landscapers to make it worth the cost of bringing the equipment and the manpower to do the lawn, and they got to do it fast. So they mow the lawn, they blow the lawn, they take all of the nutrients that was cut off of the lawn and carted away, and they only can make money if they do it fast. That's not necessary, and it's because you got the grass. But we're turning around like a big ship. We're not going to turn it around on a dime. It's going to take time, and more people are going to get lawns like this, properties like this, and it's going to become more and more popular. And then there are new careers to be had by the guys that are doing the grass work now.
Gotcha. So we're in Marshall's lawn right now, and Marshall has spent a lot of time and energy taking this place from what was a pretty traditional looking American lawn and turning it into this awesome native landscape. This is obviously your vision of a dream house. If you guys had, a mansion with unlimited property upon which to build your native gardens, what does that hypothetical native garden look like to you guys?
I have thought about this a lot. So I'm very interested in permaculture. I really like the idea of being able to grow food for ourselves while also growing food for wildlife in the same space, and regenerating ecosystems while also living sustainably off the land. So I think that's always something that I've really dreamt about. And so for me, my ideal space would be a permaculture farm with lots of kind of like outer zones for just complete ecological restoration, and kind of playing on the landscape to build as many type of ecosystems as possible. So maybe we have a forest in the upland, and then a downslope wetland, and then maybe like in my dream house there's also probably a shoreline where we can do shoreline restoration, and kind of recreating all of the really beautiful ecosystems that we can have here on Long Island. We're so blessed to be able to have so many different types of ecosystems, and so that would definitely be my dream, to be able to kind of live sustainably off the land while providing life for so many different types of wildlife in the process.
We've actually had people with massive properties consult with us about creating a more
and who's with us, just because not everyone who listens to this is going to be familiar with all of us individually and what we do.
Well, I think this is predominantly run by the Long Island Conservancy, right? This is that's who we are and what we're speaking as. But as a coincidence, Brittany and I both also work for a company that performs these services, Spadefoot Design and Construction. So in this instance, I'm talking about we as Spadefoot. We were consulted about a very large piece of property on a beautiful spot, surrounded 3/4 most of the way around by water, and it had the great lawn, like you mentioned earlier, and they didn't want it. So what did they do? We created a lot of different ecosystems that Brittany could actually tell you more about. But one of the things that we did was turn a large area of that grass into meadow. And the one way that we do that that's very financially affordable is hydroseeding. The hydroseeding is the green schmutz that they put on the side of the road after highway construction to grow grass. You put grass seed in there. But the same thing can be done with a wildflower mix. So we did in one area where they were going to have beehives, we put a pollinator mix, a lot of flowering plants that would allow for pollen and nectar for the honeybees to eat. And in others, it was just a wild meadow. And it was a great way to cover a lot of land. Your instant payoff is going to come back next year, and then the year after, and the year
No,
after.
but the payoff's also in playing with a giant super soaker.
That's what I got to do.
Like,
that was
the
my
machine,
goal.
the machinery
That's
is fun.
very true.
And that brings me to my next question for you guys. How much of what you do in your design practice is recipe, and how much is entropy? You know, and to what extent does that change over time? You know, I imagine when you guys come and do a planting, there are some people who you may deal with a customer once, or you may come back year over year to build out a property more, or to maintain what you guys have planted. How much of that becomes something that you're planning for? How much of that is letting nature do its thing, and then how much of that is trying to play jujitsu with what nature wants to do?
That's a very interesting question, especially for Spadefoot, because we usually are a little bit ragtag in the sense where we'll come in with the design in our heads. We'll come in with a general plan, and then you get to a space and you kind of have to tweak as you go, and you kind of have to read the landscape exactly in the moment and kind of change things as you go. But then also a lot of people have probably heard the term making like slow, small solutions. So we can come in and we do these massive installations, and then you kind of come back throughout the year and year after year to help these plantings into establishment and into maturity, and kind of tweaking, recognizing things that don't work, recognizing the things that do work, and leaning into those. And then, you talked about, kind of what part of the project is entropy. And a lot of I think the beauty of that is the beauty of nature. So we can plant something, and then we can kind of step back and let nature take over and kind of release all of those nutrients and those genetics into nature, and let them kind of reincorporate into the ecosystem, and kind of enter that really beautiful dance between order and chaos that an ecosystem provides. And we're really lucky to be able to kind of infuse those nutrients and those genetics into our local ecosystem that has been degrading so much. And that the fact that we can kind of join that dance is really beautiful, and kind of let nature take over, and let our plantings kind of take on a life of their own is really, really beautiful to behold. So we love it.
We have a motto at Spadefoot that we're inspired by nature, but we're driven by science. So what does that mean? That means that we're putting the plants where they are supposed to be in the ecosystem that they belong to in. Okay, so we don't change ecosystems, we determine ecosystems that exist on a property, and we support those ecosystems with the right plants. You can get native plants, but if you're not putting them in the right ecosystem, you're not providing any support to that ecosystem. People buy beach grass and live in the woods, and that's all great, it looks like, but it doesn't belong there, it's not helping the ecosystem at all. That's my easy way of answering that. We deal with a lot of customers, less and less now, but in the beginning especially, who said, I want a formal garden of native plants, and that's an oxymoron, right? We want to make a thing that, and like Frank, our partner says, they think it looks overgrown, and he doesn't like the word overgrown. It's perfectly grown. It's grown exactly the way.
It's a subjective term.
Yeah, it's exactly the way nature wants it. That's grown. It's just grown, and so there's a lot.
Yeah, but some people want like the Tom Selleck chest hair kind of, aesthetic to their garden, and some people want something a little more sculpted. How do you rein back that entropy with a little recipe if someone's like, I need a hard edge to this garden? Because I imagine you deal with a lot of customers where maybe you have two people in a household and one person is more into native plants than the other.
Definitely.
And you need to balance those interests. Like these must be fascinating conversations you have with your customers to hash out these things.
Commercial work, because it is a fascinating conversation that I think should be resolved between the two of them, and I'd hate to get in the middle of it. But Brittany's very good at it, Frank's very good at it, and I work with commercial businesses. It's a lot easier, bottom line kind of stuff.
I do definitely deal with that. Often, I'll stay silent while they work it out amongst them. But I think usually what I tell them is, a more ordered look is going to be more work. Nature likes to go where it wants to go. The seeds start to spread, the animals disperse, and things like to take on a mind of their own. And as much as we can design a garden and think, this plant likes to be here, and I know this because of my experience, but nature's going to wake up in the morning and tell you something different. So putting the gardens into more order is going to take time, it's going to take energy, it's going to take money, it's going to take resources. So it's really about balancing what the client is willing to put into the gardens, and how much energy they're willing to put, and you know, if they want that order but they're not willing to put those things in, then, you know, you have to kind of rein them in a little bit and say, okay, we're going to make it a little more simple. And then, you know, if you want a complex ordered garden, it's going to cost XYZ, and you kind of tell them that up front, and then let them, you know, duke it out amongst themselves what they want to come up with.
No, I get you. It costs a lot of time and energy, or money, which can be, you know, those can kind of be the same thing, to fight what nature wants to do.
So even with non-natives, right? And one of the great lines that Frank always uses is there are no straight lines in nature, right? Nature kind of.
Well, that's the line from Prometheus, right? When is it Idris Elba the captain in that?
I have no idea.
Have you guys seen the Alien movie Prometheus?
I'm so sorry.
I'm gonna cut this part out if I messed up the actor. But basically, he's you know, they're flying into the atmosphere of the planet that they found the alien installation on. He's like, God doesn't create in straight lines. They land. You know, that's how they know it's like the alien base.
Good.
That's so indicative of human society. That's so funny.
Well, it's the way you've been describing it. There's people on one hand and nature on the other. We have been separating the two. We've been drawing lines, in fact, and we've been insisting petulantly that things stay where they are. But a lot of this is about letting nature be itself. It's a lot easier that way.
Yeah.
Where does nature stop for you guys, or start? Like, where do you draw the lines? I'll give my answer to that question, right? Like, as a person who lives in a house, like I kind of try, like, okay, that the foundation of my house, right? Like, outside that is nature, inside this is my house, where I may not want, you know, like bugs and critters and everything else. But that's sort of where I draw the line. I know some people might draw it at like outside of their yard or outside of their neighborhood. Like, where do you guys draw that line personally, just as a thought experiment?
Well, I learned during the course of this, when we planted this whole yard with 9 different zones, that nature could be right in front of me in all sorts of variety and within a very small space. And it really opened my eyes as to how we can all reconnect with nature if only we would just plant it in our yards.
Yeah, I agree. I personally operate under the assumption that there is no division between humans and nature. We are nature, we are of nature, and so everything we create is essentially technically nature. And like, even, you know, there's nature in our homes, in the food we eat, and even like the media we consume sometimes. So like, and even in our thoughts and our actions, like, everything is influenced by nature. We influence nature. We are all ultimately one. So in my opinion, there's not really a division, which is kind of like why I truly believe that it's so important to incorporate nature into our lives, because we are not separate. We are all the same thing. And like, when we make these divisions, it only makes us more unhealthy, and it only makes nature more unhealthy, and it only makes us more unhappy and nature more unhappy. And I think we'd all just be better off if we kind of thought of it as one, you know, and part of us in the way that it once was, you know, before any of us, you know, were even here.
Yeah, I kind of mirror that. Nature doesn't stop for me. It goes right through, and nature would take over. I don't have a problem with protecting the walls of where I live so that I'm not sleeping with termites. I got no problem with that. And before I got really involved in this, I did extermination, which is like, we don't use, by the way, we don't use any herbicides, we don't use any pesticides in our business, but I couldn't say that as an exterminator. We did what we had to do to get rid of bed bugs, termites, roaches, and, you know, to me, those are the, you know, they belong on Earth. I don't have to share my bed with them. I don't have to share my kitchen cabinets with them, and I'll do what I got to do to keep them out.
That's fair. I think that's very fair.
What do you guys wind up using to keep insects out of your house? I use diatomaceous earth.
Oh.
I have a couple bags of diatomaceous earth, and in the spring and then once again in the fall, I kind of walk around the whole house and I kind of, you know, pour it at the base of the foundation to kind of create a hard barrier, and then with, you know, a little rain, it becomes a diatomaceous mud that kind of just sticks there and kind of makes a barrier that doesn't stop flying insects from coming in, but it definitely lowers my, you know, my ant count in my kitchen. And and anything that's going to try and crawl in. I don't want to say it stops the bees. Is something like that, which is my understanding is that it's a naturally occurring material, is something like that a good choice relative to other poisons? Because again, I know nothing about this, so I'm trying to do my best to, use the internet to make informed choices that I hope are not poisoning the planet forever. Right?
Right.
So that's
I think
an okay choice?
It's much better than chemicals for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That makes me feel better. Ethically, sort of, where do you guys draw the line at your thought process of something like that? I know you said you don't use herbicides or pesticides, but like when you're trying to draw those lines between where a client wants nature to be and where they might not want nature to be, what forces are at your disposal to actually make those lines happen?
I think the biggest thing is communication with the client. Like because every client is truly different. Some people want to live in a tree house, and then some people, maybe their child got them into the native plants and they're kind of guilted into it, but they don't really want the bugs around them. So they'll put, a little section in the back corner of their yard. And so it's really important to kind of talk to the clients and kind of gauge like where they are and kind of meet them where they are. And once you are able to establish those boundaries right away, then you can kind of operate and make everybody happy. But I think really it's just about talking to the client and gauging where they're comfortable.
Yeah, for me it's the why. You explain the why of what you're doing, where you're putting things, and the bottom line though is it's their property, right? So we can explain to them what we think they should be. Yeah, well, I want that to be grass. Okay, well it's your grass. I get it. That's your call. But that doesn't mean we don't circle back. Sometimes, we do what we want to do. What we think is right.
Sometimes you need to learn by doing something the wrong way the first time.
Well, it's sort of like what Brittany was saying about when things work well. That adaptive management is our credo for stewardship of the projects we put in. So if something does well, you don't hold it back. You let it continue to do well. Something doesn't do well, you put it someplace else.
I think also one way to do that is because like so much of what we do is trying to preach and trying to get people to kind of see the light, so to speak. And like I think one way to kind of hit people with that is to kind of like tug on the heartstrings. Like a lot of people, like I think there's maybe few people who would say, I hate when I see a bird in my yard, or I hate when I see a bumblebee go from flower to flower, or when a bird nests in my yard. Like even people who don't really care about nature, they get really excited when, oh my gosh, there's a robin nesting in our porch, like, and then their kids get to watch those chicks grow up. And I think, kind of hitting people with those really warm and joyous moments is where you kind of get people to change their minds, and like really showing people that once you plant the native species, the animals come, and then once they see the animals in their yard, they have that funny little feeling of warmth, and then they can't go back, because it really just makes us enjoy life more when we connect with nature and we see the beauty of other animals surviving in our yards. And so it's like, as much as like the facts are so important and communicating all of the ecological knowledge is so important, but sometimes it's just people just really want to feel something. And I think nature is so beautiful with that. It really just connects us so much.
It triggers wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one exception I recall is we do these projects called Sump to Sanctuary, where we take a sump, especially one that's denigrated and it's got garbage in it.
And what is a sump, for those of us who don't know what
So there are hundreds of them around Long Island. It's a place for stormwater to land. It's a big hole in the ground with sand on the bottom of the hole that would allow the water to dissipate if we have really hard rain.
So I'm driving around a highway exit and sort of that pit inside the clover, right?
That's a sump. That we consider a sump, but the more traditional ones in residential areas are fenced off, and they're behind houses. Okay, so and then the water from the streets around it are not pumped, but they just through gravity they do go into that. It's a discharge basin, is what it's called. So what we do is we take out all the invasive plants because those are all built in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. We take all of those invasive species that have taken over in there. We plant native plants that are going to do well there, and the birds come. And it makes. And we did one. Our first one we did with the Audubon Society of South Shore Audubon Society. They did it, and they commemorated it in the name of one of their past presidents who had given it a lot of work.
Michael
Michael Sperling.
Shameless plug. Watch the film.
Michael Sperling. Google it. And everybody loved it, especially the people in the Audubon Society. But one of the neighbors had an RV parked right next to the now bird sanctuary, and you give food for birds. Birds eat. When birds eat on one end, it's going to come out the other end, and he didn't like it coming out the other end on his RV. So he was a disgruntled non-environmentalist.
You should just go for a long trip.
Or a tarp, but whatever. Anyway, he's the only guy. I'm serious. All the jobs that we've done, that's the only complaint I've ever heard. Everybody else.
Meanwhile, no, everyone else in the neighborhood's probably looking at his giant land boat and wishing he could take it.
Yes, guzzling. He's a nice guy. He was a really nice guy. Just didn't like bird poop. And hey, listen.
Who does?
Not a big fan myself.
Small price to pay.
It depends on where it lands. On your head, it's not a good thing.
It's supposed to be good luck, but who wants that good luck?
Yeah, but like that's a platitude. And everyone knows it's a platitude.
It's like rain on your wedding day.
It's bird crap on your head.
Yeah.
I feel like the hard part with getting people to really like nature from a storytelling standpoint is how do you make them engage with the animals that maybe aren't as cute. You know what I mean? So like people hate rats, but they love squirrels. They're kind of the same animal, but squirrels just have really good PR, right? How do you get someone to like a possum? You know what I mean? Or like my favorite animal, hands down, is a raccoon. Raccoons, like some people think they're cute. In their cute camp. How do you get people to like those kinds of animals where it's like it may not be an animal that's super desirable, or it might be the termites that are living in a dead tree stump, but that tree stump is not in your house. How do you engage customers, but then also on the Long Island Conservancy level when we deal with it, Marshall, like how do we get people to understand that like no, sometimes mushrooms are okay, sometimes like ecological decay in an area is okay. It's just how do we convey to them that it's all part of a cycle as opposed to a sign of neglect?
In nature, everything has its purpose. What we try to do is we try to remove plants that have no business being here, because they're going to try to fulfill their purpose that runs counter to the purposes of the other plants here, most drastically. But just understanding the nature of food webs. It's like the game Jenga. You pull out a stick and the whole thing can come tumbling down. Let's say that stick was mosquitoes. We all hate mosquitoes, but you take out the mosquito stick, what happens to the rest of the ecosystem?
It's true. It's like kind of teaching people about their value, and because this is something that I grapple with a lot, or showing somebody a really cool wasp, and I get really, really excited, and then they're like, okay, Brittany, you're crazy. And I'm like, no, it's so cute. Like, it's so important. It does all these amazing functions. And like, sometimes that's not even enough. Some people are like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And then some people are like, cool, but keep it over there. I think, all we can do is kind of lead by example and show our own exuberance and show our love. And hopefully, people will start to come over to our side a little bit.
I'm wondering if it's instinctive at some point. I mean, people generally, is it only American culture that's like, ew, bug? I think it's so. What do you think?
I think it's socialized. Like, I think
okay.
I think we are kind of, when you see people when you're a young kid and a bug comes in the room and everybody screams, you learn like, okay, that's something really scary. But if you're exposed to people, especially as a young kid, because kids love bugs. Like, in my experience, like if you see adults as a young kid coming up, holding in, saying, look how cool this is, like, isn't this awesome? And the kids usually are like, yeah, wow, that's beautiful. And if you show them that there's nothing to be afraid of, they kind of grow up without that fear. I think it's so important to lead by example with those things, because sometimes you can't really preach people into coming over to your side. You often have to just show them.
Yeah, I think also, you can't browbeat them into believing what they say. They say if you took all the insects out of the world, we'd fall apart within, I think, a month tops, because that is such a critical part of the cycle. So, if you know that, and there's this one nun I think she's in Vietnam, who has one of the top chefs in the country. There's this show online about these great chefs from around the world, and when she serves food, she serves the food like a chef here would, if it had insect bites taken out of it, would discard that as not worthy. She eat. You know, we're sharing with the bugs. Of course we are. So we eat the leaf that the bug left for us. You know, so it's a mentality, and you're not going to change some people's minds, but doing it. You know, just establishing it and showing it and having it become societally normal to do this with small steps, right? We start with, we don't tell everybody to get rid of their lawn. Take a garden on either side and in the back, and slowly work your way in. It's a matter of degrees, and it's not going to happen necessarily in my lifetime. Maybe Brittany's, maybe not. I don't know. But as we slowly turn it, you know, people will be more aware of it, and there's going to always be people who hate bugs. My middle daughter especially. You're not talking her into believing that there's anything worthy of them. Just keep them away from her. She had an accident because there was a bug in her car. You know, that's the kind of situation. So
I mean, that's a primal fear. I really hate crabs.
Yeah.
Like when you go to the beach and there's that one spot on the beach where like they've all shed their exoskeletons, but then 1 out of every 10 exoskeletons is like still a live crab, so it moves on you. Like, oh man.
You run in the other direction?
Yeah, that's the stuff of my nightmares. That's the stuff that like, it's because I don't trust the way they move. Like, they're just not, they're delicious. I'm glad
for
they
me,
exist.
butter on a hammer is a great equalizer.
Aw.
I know, because they're not smarter than me, but they're more numerous. Like, and that's the thing too with fear, Mark. Like, it's irrational. So like you're I mean, I feel like with lots of things, you're dealing with people who are going to approach everything from an emotional standpoint. Marshall, did you approach redoing your property here from an emotional standpoint? I mean, there must have been some emotion, like I want to build a forest.
Well, yeah. I mean, we moved here in 1965, and there was always all this potential, and to finally have a chance to unlock all that, it's meant a lot to me. Yeah.
I think a lot of decisions we make are often led by emotions, whether we know it or not. And I think nature is one of the most emotional connections that we can have as animals on this planet. I mean, we are of this planet, and it is of us. And I think that primal connection is so strong. And sometimes people don't know that because they're so far removed from it, because they live in a society that removes them from it. And sometimes it takes, you know, one experience to kind of lock that back in, like click that back into their mind and remember, you know, oh my gosh, like this is so beautiful, and it makes me feel so wonderful. And
it should be beautiful in all 4 seasons. We're calling this episode putting your yard to bed for the winter. I mean, that's comes from a position of empathy, understanding that we're part of these natural processes, and that we have to care for our land. Yeah, and we have to feed the ones who need it the most, because they're going into such a rough time now, where there's, you know, so much less food available, and when we kind of clear things away and bag them up and throw them out, we're clearing away so many food sources for so many individuals. And maybe they're not the cutest individuals, but they still deserve to be here, and they still have hungry bellies, and you know, we like to eat, and so do they. And it's like a lot of those, like even like some of this herbaceous material that we have here, you know, leaving up, some people may say these flower stalks are really ugly, but you know, a bird who's starving in the middle of the winter may land on this and see it as paradise, because all of a sudden there's seeds for them to eat. And most bees actually are ground nesting, and there are some species that will winter in those stalks. Yeah, and then, you know, they're emerging in the springtime, and they're there for us to enjoy when we want to be out in our yards. But you know, these animals don't have, you know, they don't go inside and live in a home and then go to a grocery store. They rely on the plants that are out here, and so it's so important for us to be able to feed them in the way that we would want to be fed if we were in their place.
And that's natural, not only amongst human beings, but there's science to show now that when there's a stand of trees and there's a tree that's suffering, the other trees will actually restrict what they take up in nutrients from the ground to allow that sick tree to have more of what it needs. It's more natural than just human. It's just natural to be able to take care of other beings.
Altruism and creating communities is so natural.
We like to think we have the corner of the market on that, but we're just one of the cogs.
Nature has an interesting balance between competition and cooperation, and it's it's hard to tell when it's gonna, you know, I guess where that line turns for you. You know what I mean? Because like, you know, you might be able to eat something and then something can eat you. You know what I mean? It makes you question, like, are we the actual masters of the universe, or are we just like, you know how like there are cells in our body? Like, what if we're just cells and like the planet is the organism? You know?
Right.
I mean, now I've gone completely
I would ask our house
cuckoo.
cat. I would ask our house cats who's in charge.
They've domesticated us.
That is so true, Marshall. That is so true.
Or the dogs that are walking their humans to pick up the poop after them. That's
Right.
You gotta ask yourself.
I mean,
who's in charge here?
I have some close friends, but I'm not going to carry around their excrement.
Yeah, but it's true. You know, it's a complex world, and we're kind of I think we as humans tend to operate in this like scarcity mentality. Like, if I don't take it all, then I'm never going to have anything. And I think that's kind of born out of fear, and it's born out of evolution and struggling for so long. But we don't
sort of zero-sum game theoretical approach to your environment. Like, I guess you want to flip that on its head and create a situation where your landscaping processes are creating more rather than extracting from the sum total of resources that are being created.
And how ultimately we become something that's greater than the sum of our parts.
Well, just let nature take hold. I mean, everything that's growing here is like freakishly outsized. It loves being here, and the seeds from all these plants could probably sow another 10 acres. Right.
Yeah, and they probably do, because now you've created a seed bank where the animals are dispersing them far and wide. And I think that's really lovely.
Much to my amusement.
Yeah, and I'm sure your neighbor's amusement too. But like, even in like our natural spaces, like those birds are probably pooping out seeds all over town. And that's really wonderful. You know, when you create a native garden, you're not only, you know, planting those plants in your yard, but natural dispersal processes mean that those seeds are now going to leave your yard and go into natural spaces, and that's ultimately what we want.
The one drawback to that is, with all the native plants here, all the food for the native birds and insects, the birds are coming in having eaten berries from invasive plants. So I'm out there plucking the Oriental bittersweet and the porcelain berry out and so forth. It's like a UN of invasive plants here. It would be anyway. What?
How much time do you spend weeding on a given week?
At this point,
in the year? Or
at this point in the year, maybe an hour. It's not a lot. It's like, oh, what's that doing there? But it certainly helps come springtime, because that hour can become very easily 3 or 4 until I drop, you know.
Yeah.
And it really depends on what's already in the ground about to strike.
And that's the problem of being on Long Island is, you know, sometimes we create native gardens, and then this is like an island. It's like an island of paradise in a sea of invasives. And so sometimes we have to like almost protect our borders, like, you know, go through and kind of keep these invasives from coming in. And like that's why we really need people to kind of adopt this more, because, you know, the more people around us have native gardens and remove their invasives, the less they're a problem for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah. But you know, we're trying. We work hard at Spadefoot to remove invasive species. It's a big part of what we do. So we're trying.
But we need your help.
We do. Come
So
hire
the
us.
best,
You can prevent invasive
Shameless plug.
plant spread.
Yeah.
so the best solution on how to put your lawn to bed, it's, you know, we're talking to the lazy landscaper, because all you really got to do is nothing. That's the best thing you could do. And then the next best thing is to get rid of some of the invasives while it's easy, because that's saving you work in the spring. It's the lazy man's way of being a landscaper.
But doing nothing, right? And I'm trying to shoehorn you into my next point. Like, if I rake it into the beds, that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. If I take all the leaves that fall on my lawn, right? Because I don't want my neighbors to think that I have let my property fall into a state of neglect, right? So there is a social expectation of what people expect your lawn to look like.
Oh, God,
I would
yes.
like my choices to be short of war crimes. Raking is okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that mulching was actually doing some damage to the ecosystem if there are butterfly eggs on the bottom of the leaves. Mark had mentioned this earlier today when we were wandering around the yard. I've been mulching for the last 3 years. I'm going to try to avoid doing that this year, but I guess.
Well,
What
look,
else,
the butterflies.
what else lives in the leaves?
The
I guess,
butterflies.
Other insects, yeah.
They love. The butterflies love. I think parsley.
I have parsley.
Some butterflies,
Dude, I have
swallowtails
the whole
do.
Simon and Garfunkel spice rack going in my
So
garden.
parsley, grow those with the parsley in your garden, and then the butterflies will not go in the lawn if they got parsley.
All right.
Okay, that's one.
Yeah, I think
That's
also
interesting.
mulch is a really useful tool.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
a
not
useful
trying to turn
tool
you out
for
and not
building
mulching.
soil. You know, especially if you're initially installing a garden and you want to keep weed pressure down while native plants arise. But then once you create a native system, often the mulch then comes from within the system itself. So then you can do chop and drop, where you kind of, that's like the lazy way of garden maintenance. If you do want to chop, you know, chop something and drop it right where it is. And so then you have that herbaceous material decomposing and kind of acting as, you know, the leaves or the mulch. And it's a little more, you know, you don't have to worry about impacting anybody who might be nesting in the soil or in the leaf litter. So it's about establishing the garden initially, and mulch can be a really useful tool, and then you kind of let the system take care of itself, let the nutrients kind of come from within the system itself, and then you can kind of keep the functionality of the nutrient cycling and the life cycles of different kinds of animal species, while also maintaining some sense of order and ornamentation, you know, especially like as you're advising clients who want those things, and you can kind of give them another alternative while also being good to the ecosystem.
Gotcha. What is your favorite microorganism? This is a question I want to ask all of our guests on the show.
I would say it's more broad. I love mushrooms. I mean,
There you go.
I love mushrooms. I think they're so incredible, all the functions that they perform in the ecosystem. They without mushrooms we wouldn't exist. I mean, we can say that about, you know, anything in the ecosystem, but they cycle nutrients, but they also, you know, they create this network in the soil that is more than just cycling nutrients. It's a brain in the soil. It's a nervous system in the soil. It's an immune system in the soil. They literally create antibiotics and antivirals, and they feed them to the plants as needed. So they act as like chaperones to the forest and to the plants that are planted within them. They really care for everybody around them, and they communicate with one another, and they support everybody in the soil. And I really admire mushrooms, and I think they're beautiful, and they're also really delicious to eat. So I love mushrooms.
I have to only disagree with her in one degree. I hate eating mushrooms. I hate the taste. Let them stay in the
Cannot be
ground where they're
perfect, Mark.
doing. Yeah, no. Let them stay in the ground. And when the truffles got to get put on everything. I hate it.
when they realized that they could charge you $17
Exactly
for
right.
French
Shaving.
fries.
Yeah.
But the key is you can get truffles at like Home Goods or at the supermarket. You can shave your own truffles on your own French fries, and the cost of that is significantly cheaper.
That's why I
There
always
you
bring
go.
it with me.
Oh wow! Oh wow!
Pocket truffles.
Pocket truffles. That's amazing.
I grow them in there.
The Little Green Shoots podcast is brought to you by no one yet. We are actively searching for a sponsor. So if there's anyone out here who would like to continue to hear knuckleheads like us talk about plants, the environment, and, you know, if you want to just hang out with Marshall while he, you know,
Pontificates.
exactly. Then we are the place for that. Otherwise, where can we learn more about you guys, your company, and what you do?
SpadefootNY.com has our website that we're always working on, but more importantly, the Long Island Conservancy. Marshall really has done a fantastic job with that, and that's longislandconservancy.org.
Awesome. And you'll be able to find all of us in the description to this podcast, which I have not written yet, but I'm going to assure the viewer is full of information.
And we'll be busy pulling weeds in the meantime.
Awesome.
Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot,
Thank
Pete.
you.
Good job. And cut.
Cut. Thank you so much, guys.